Hello and welcome to Elisabeth Hogarth Designs. Today I'm going to be sharing a tutorial to make a DL journal similar to this one that I created for the launch of Little Robin Redbreast. So this is one of the premium collection 12 by 12 paper pads. The inside cover features some of the toppers that you can easily cut away. And then the front page has a grid-like system of 9 toppers featuring the garden throughout the year. It's been beautifully illustrated by Claire-Therese Gray. And as you can see, everything throughout the papers relates to the garden. So you've got seed packets from spring. You've got the Little Robin Redbreast itself perched on the watering can with some checkered papers, beautiful springtime daisies, and then as you work further through the book you're moving into summer. You've got the greenhouse, which is one of my favourite pages. I love the detail of the drawing. And then you've got similar blues and pinks and peaches featuring Little Robin Redbreast herself. Then we move into autumn time, so the season of harvest. Some of these papers are deeply embossed. They are very high quality, so not only are the designs stunning, you've got deep colours and beautiful quality paper that can be used for constructions or making cards or gift bags. You can see here we've moved into winter, so we've got some snowy scenes, and then we come to the reverse of the 12 by 12 papers, and on the back you've got a picture of Claire-Therese herself. Along with this, I'm using these stamps that complement the papers. I've got a packet of the chipboard ephemera, which I'll show you more of later, and 2 rolls of washi tape that will come in very handy for this particular project. I'm also going to be incorporating some of my previous Craft Consortium stamps within the project. They're mostly animal themed, and it may well be that I'll use some of the Craft Consortium metal charms. This is the original DL journal that I made. I made it quite quickly because it was needed for the TV launch of Little Robin Redbreast, and I sort of made it up as I went along. I did base it upon some of the travel journals that I made for Graphic 45. So based upon that idea, I wanted to make a project that would show the glorious papers and how you can adapt the toppers and the washi tape to create this journal. So I began by creating the outside cover, and then these are like shopping list books that actually were made from the scraps from within the book. Here you can see the washi tape, and it's a simple notebook that slips into the front cover. So I made one for the front and then a similar one for the reverse. So you've got the chipboard ephemera on the front, and again these are made from the scraps left over from within the signatures and the album itself. I wanted to make 3 signatures for the notebooks, and you can see that I've incorporated different designs of the 12 by 12 papers, and it all works beautifully together. They are inserted within an elasticated band, and within these original signatures I left them all loose leaf purely for a time scale thing, but I think what I'll do now is I'll go back in and I will stick some of these in. I've used some Graphic 45 dies to create some insert tabs. So you can see that the signatures fit within the elasticated cord, and then these are held in place and they flip easily back and forth. The 12 by 12 papers make fabulous front covers. The inside pages are like a manuscript paper. I've had it in my craft stash for many years. It came in handy. I like the ivory, but you could easily use lightweight photocopying paper, or even you can use this design for junk journaling. So use what you have around you. Journal went to TV as a sample for the launch of Little Robin Redbreast, and I asked the team at Craft Consortium if they could return it to me because I wanted to use it as a prototype, and also because of the time scales I didn't get the chance to film a Little Robin Redbreast video, and part of the reason why I make these videos is as a reminder of the projects that I make. The original journal was made from an A4 sheet of cardstock, and it worked well enough, but I've decided to make it slightly sturdier. So I'm using some parcel packaging. This is an Amazon wallet, or the best cardstock to use actually comes with the packaging that arrives from the Craft Consortium website. They pack in really sturdy boxes, and if you buy the 12 by 12 you'll find that you've got a 12 by 12 box. So keep everything that you are sent from them and you will be able to use it within your craft projects. And all I'm going to do here is to cut it down, and I want to end up with a base on this particular journal that's going to measure 11.5 inches by 9 inches. You can see here that I'm using the right angles of my cutting mat to ensure that I've got straight edges. So if you use the 90 degrees that you see within the left hand corner of the screen and a T-ruler, you should be able to square up any scrap of card. So I'm using a scalpel to easily cut through the cardboard, but you may prefer to use your guillotine. It's entirely up to you, but you just want to end up with a piece of card that measures 11.5 inches by 9 inches. So once we've got the main base, I'm going to secure it down with some removable tape, and I want to mark up the score lines which will form the inside spine of the cover. So again, I'm using my T-ruler and I'm marking at 4.5 inches and 5 inches, then 6.5 and 7 inches. I'm going to draw in the pencil line, and this will eventually be scored. Then I'm going to bring in my scoreboard and carefully score down those pencil lines at 4.5 and 5 inches and 6.5 and 7 inches. And this will allow the journal cover to slightly curve around the spine. It gives you a little bit more wiggle room for the signatures. Now on this particular part I would do as I say, not as I do, because I made a slight error here in that I didn't leave enough of a distance between the signatures from the top and the bottom, and that only came to light once I put the elastic in. But for the purpose of this video, I'm measuring here down from the top at the 1/2 inch and the 1 inch mark, and I'm creating 3 miniature dividing points in order to centre up where I want the hole punches to be. So as you can see, I'm carefully measuring from 1/2 inch down and 1 inch down, and I'm using my T ruler to draw in these lines. Then within the area of the spine, so between the 5 inch mark and the 6.5 inch mark, I'm going to create 3 further pencil points at 5 1/4, 5 3/4 and 6 1/4. And again we're doing this at the top and the bottom of the rectangle. Draw yourself in another faint line, and then the cutting point where we're going to create a hole is where the lines intersect, but in hindsight I could have gone slightly higher, so I could have made my cutting point at the 1/2 inch mark. Or indeed I could have made the journal smaller, but this tutorial is really here to show you how to create the journal cover and the signatures. You'll find that with different widths of cords and different papers you will slightly adjust your markings. So here are the crosses where I'm going to use my hole punch to create the eyelet holes, and really that's all the measuring that you're going to have to do within the whole project. Now we're going to move on to making the signatures, and these particular ones measure 8.5 by 8 1/4, so you're going to score these in the middle, and then the pages themselves will be 8 1/4 by 8, so 1/4 of an inch smaller than the covers. So I've got some manuscript paper, this is the last of my stash, and I'm using some vellum as well, and I've got 4 pages of the manuscript paper and 1 page of the vellum, so I'm putting equal piles to create 3 signatures, and then these will be cut down to the required length. You may find it easier to peg these together, but I find that with this particular trimmer I can hold them in place and cut them fairly successfully. So I'm cutting them down in groups, so again the pages will measure 8 1/4 in length and 8 inches in height. Keep hold of the excess because this is what you'll end up using to create the notebooks that I showed you right at the beginning. So we're going to make 3 sets of pages, and while I'm cutting these, a quick shout out to Wendy Woodhouse, who won the Craft Consortium giveaway for their 10th birthday. So it was held on my Facebook and Instagram pages, and Wendy was the lucky winner and won the complete collection of Little Robin Redbreast. And I also offered to run a workshop with her. So I know that Wendy has got a lot of things going on at the moment, and her time is not necessarily her own. So one of the reasons why I've made this longer video is as a tutorial for Wendy. So I hope that you'll end up watching this, Wendy, and making use of the ideas. This video is longer than normal, so I do hope that you will watch it all the way through. There are plenty of hints and tricks to make your own journal, and there are a few more things that I learned along the way, and I will be honest where there were a few little hiccups and how I overcame them, because that's how I learn, and I'm sure that that is helpful to many of you as well. So I'm folding the almost squares in half with the vellum on the outside, and then burnishing the score line. And you can make as many of these signatures as you like. You'll find that you could fit far more into the thicker journal cover than you imagine. Moving on to the outside cover, I pick 3 different designs. They all work beautifully together. And again, the outside covers are cut down to 8.5 inches by 8.25 inches. So again, all you need to do is to cut them down. Keep all of these scraps. I ended up using round about 5 pages of the 12 by 12, which isn't a lot for a project like this. So the inside pages are added to the signatures, and then I'm going to use my corner rounder on the 1/4 inch to round off all of the inside and outside corners. It's quite important that you round off the inside corners as well, because this will allow the signatures to sit within the elasticated band. So you can see how I go back in and I make sure all of the inside spines are also cornered off. It will make more sense as we come to put the journal together. So this time I'm going to cover the entire piece of cardboard. The 12 by 12 fits nicely, so this is trimmed down so that you've got round about 1/4 inch around each side. Ideally you could do with a little bit more, but 1/4 inch bigger works perfectly fine. So I'm going to use the beautiful green and white greenhouse paper, and for this I'm using some Mod Podge glue because I like using it as a sealant as well as a glue, but any PVA glue will work perfectly fine. I'm placing the cardboard directly onto the paper, and then I'm using my bone tool to keep working the paper and the folds around the spine. I should say that a lot of the way that I make these are based upon years of making books and covering folders with the children in my class at school. So I hope that you're picking up a few ideas here. It really is made up as I go along, and I'm trying to explain the process as clearly as I can. But please, if you do have any specific questions, leave them in the comments below. All I'm doing here is rounding off the corners and snipping away small triangles where the paper meets the edge of the spine. Then I'm manipulating that 1/4 of an inch border around the edge of the cardboard and sealing it down with my tool and with a little bit of the glue. Take your time securing these parts in place. Ideally you need a wider border, but this works perfectly well. It just takes a little bit of time to make sure that all of the paper edges are secure in place. Once you're happy that the outside edges are neat enough, you can then come back in with some more decorative paper, and this time we're going to cover the inside of the journal cover. So these two panels measure 9 by 4.5 inches, and keep the excess because you're going to use that to cover the spine. I'm now bringing in some red tape and I'm securing down all of those edges, and along with the red tape I'm going to add some wet glue and carefully place the 9 by 4.5 inch panels down onto the inside of the cover. Make sure that you are working from the outside edge in, and if possible try not to go over the score lines that you made at the beginning at the 5 1/4 and the 6 1/4 point. Keep manipulating the paper and the spine to make sure that it remains flexible, and then you're going to bring in your hole punch and carefully line up the hole, the larger hole if possible, with the crosses that you made on the spine. Once again, these were marked at between the 1/4 and the 1 inch marks. In hindsight, these should have been slightly higher up so that the signatures that I made slipped in more easily. Once I've cut out the holes on one side, I'm covering the inside of the spine with that remaining piece of paper, and ideally you want to keep this as flexible as possible, so add the glue but keep manipulating the paper and the creases that you've made, and add further score lines if necessary because you want this to bend with the booklet over time. On the original journal I made, I cut down the pieces to fit within the spine on the cardboard, but it's worth taking your time to cover the entire journal because you end up with a much neater finish, but the choice is entirely up to you. So now I'm using the original holes on the inside of the cover to use my hole punch again to create the outside eyelet holes. The glue hasn't quite dried on the paper, so I had to keep removing the wet paper from the punch, but really wasn't a problem. And then I'm bringing in some coloured eyelets and I will use the hole punch to secure these in place. I found a really pretty sage green that matches up to the papers perfectly, and I really like the colourways of this. Once the eyelets are in place, I want to leave the journal cover to dry for an hour or so. So I add a stamping block to it and a little bit of weight to ensure that it will dry flat and all of the papers are secure. This gives me a chance to do a little bit of stamping, so I bring in my VersaFine Clair pine cone and a selection of the Craft Consortium papers. So I begin with their little Robin Redbreast stamps, and I found that the Winter Woodland, which was originally designed by Katie Hackney, and the Woodland, which is another Claire Therese design, work really well together. I'm using the brown ink because I like the effects of it with the cream manuscript paper, and my stamping platform allows me to repeat stamp and keep the designs in a similar place on the page. All I'm going to do is work through each one of the pages using a variety of the stamps to decorate each one of the inside signature pages. I hope that gave you a few ideas on how to decorate the pages. Now I'm going to move on and sew the inside of the signature spines. Again, this is something that I used to do with the children at school, so I hope I'm not offending any bona fide journal makers in the way that I'm putting this together, but I used to keep it simple and I find to this day that it still works well. So I'm finding the centre point, and I did use centimetres to make the marks here, so I'm measuring roughly at 10.5 centimetres, then either side at 5.5 and 15.5 centimetres. Working on an old foam stamping mat, you can use magazines, but you need something underneath because then you're going to use your pokey tool to create small holes at these markings through the small spine of the signature. In with white twine and elasticated cord and a large darning needle, and the twine at this point is round about 12 inches long, and I'm threading it through the centre point of the signature. Then from the outside lower hole I'm coming back through the pages. Then I pull the twine to the upper hole, back out, and then from the outside back through the centre hole. And then I'm going to loop the thread underneath the inside cotton and make 2 secure, like a square knot I think it's called, and then I cut away. At this point I leave some excess, but I do end up cutting away more of this. So again I'm going to work through the other 2 signatures, lining up the paper and the cover, adding the large paper clips to keep them secure in place, bringing in the ruler and measuring at 10.5, 5.5 and 15.5 centimetres using my pokey tool. And again we're going to go from the inside, middle out, bottom out and in, pull the thread all the way down, out and in and back through the centre. Loop the thread underneath the centre and make 2 knots. And then one last time to be sure, line up the papers, secure them in place with your paper clips. By this point you should have the hang of it, measuring at the 10.5, 5.5 and 15.5 centimetre points, using your papering tool to make your holes, cutting your 12-inch thread, so in the middle, through the bottom, back in to the top, pull it all the way through, in through the middle, and then secure the thread in place. I'm going to do this on the original because I really like the effect of it, and now that I've got more time I can make the original journal even better. To neaten off the spine area I decided to use the seed packet washi that comes within the little Robin Redbreast collection. The washi tape is a very high quality, so you can use it as a decorative tape within all of your projects. I love working with this, and I think this particular design worked well with the papers. Now I'm ready to add the elasticated twine cord to the eyelet holes, and I'll try and talk you through this. And again it's made up really from things that I used to do with the children, so for me this way works. So I'm going through the top centre and coming back into the top left. I bring that piece of cord down and thread it through the bottom left, and then back in the centre, and then this is where it gets a little bit tricky because this cord is wider than the original, so I have to pull one side of the centre cord as tightly as I can and use my pokey tool to bring the other end through the same hole. It is a little bit tricky, and sometimes it goes as quickly as anything, and other times you're pulling your hair out trying to get it through. But this cord was thicker than the original, so do bear that in mind when you're putting these together and making your eyelet holes. I cut the cord at an angle and eventually it came through, and then I continued on with the threading so that the right hand side was taken through the holes as well. Then I'm adding in the signatures, and it was at this stage that I found, because of the cord and the size of the eyelet holes, that the bands were tighter than I would have liked them to be, so do adjust your measurements as you go. They do still fit, they're just a little bit tight, so I probably will go back and slightly adjust the size of the booklets. So now you can see we've got all three signatures in place. I really like the way the papers go together, and I like the effect of the stamped pages. You remember all the scraps of patterned paper and the manuscript paper I told you to keep? These are going to be used to make the two notebooks at the front and the back of the journal. All I'm doing here is separating them out. I ended up using 4 pages of the manuscript paper and 1 page of the vellum, and I'm creating easy notepads by gluing the top of each page together, sealing them in place. I used to make these when I was a child. I've always been fascinated with paper making and making notes and writing, and I really haven't changed all that much. It still gives me pleasure to make something like this. So we're making up 2 of them, rounding the bottom corner and adding a little bit of the washi tape to tie everything in together. And the second pad is made in exactly the same way. Then I am taking some of the scrap pattern paper. The pattern paper in the end measured 3.5 inches in width, and the main cover was 8.25 inches. So all you do is you take as many strips as you need to cover the manuscript paper. So that's just slightly smaller at 3.25 by 8 inches, and it's a really quick way and a useful way to use up all of the pieces of paper that you've used at the start of the project. I use these. You can add magnets to the back of them, and they are fantastic for shopping lists if you add them to your fridge freezer. They make really good gifts for craft fairs as well. So I'm using double-sided tape to secure the manuscript paper into the main part of the pad. This time I decided to create 2 pockets to hold the notebooks in rather than using the middle band. So again I'm using the excess paper. It measures round about 5.5 inches in width, and it's round about 3 inches in length. You want it to sit just inside the perimeter of the inside cover. It's really quick and simple. I'm just scoring at either end of a 1/2 inch border. And I add some double-sided tape. You can use red liner tape to secure the sides and the base in place. I'm adding a rounded corner to the outside edge so that it lines up nicely with the main cover of the album. And the trick here is to line it up to the outside edge rather than the inside fold. I'm adding a quick corner punch to the middle of the pocket to allow the book to slip in easily, and then I repeat the process all over again for the front pocket. In addition, I added a smaller pocket to the front of this one, and you'll see it in the finished album. And then I was able to add some seed packet envelopes. Lost a little bit of the film here, but to finish off the journal I made a middle wraparound band to hold it in place. You can of course use some elastic cord, you could tie it together with some ribbon, but I wanted to keep it fairly simple, so as before I used a wraparound band, which you can now see here, again using the coordinating paper. And here we have the DL journal so far. So you can see the front pocket with the seed packet, very easy to make and sits nicely in the front of the journal. Here's the shopping list notebook with the washi tape on the front of the vellum. Then we move through the signature pages so you can see how well the decorative paper works with these stamped images. And here I've added some Graphic 45 insert wallets. If you've got any questions about the specific products that I've used, please leave them in the comments below. I have tried to make this as comprehensive as possible. But I'm happy to answer any of your questions. So you can see all of these stamped images, how well they work together. And then we've got the final signature in place, again with the vellum, the stamped images, there's the pheasant and the pumpkin. And then I've complemented it with some pumpkin paper. And then we move through to the back. You've got another seed packet envelope and the shopping list. Every time you make one of these journals you learn something new, so I am going to apply some of these methods to the original one. I think I'll change the cover and I might add in some additional pockets as well. Little Robin Redbreast was launched by Craft Consortium about a year ago, and I made several other projects. So because this is the first time I've recorded this collection, I'm going to add photos of the additional projects that I made. So please do stick around to the end of the video, and if you want further details then follow me at Elisabeth Hogarth Designs. Here we have the two journals. I love them both. I hope you do too, and I look forward to welcoming you back here again soon. Bye bye for now.